One of the things you should notice, and I'll leave the default transparency here, that'll just help us understand that we are working in the context of an assembly and we're working on a component. And we know that the component's blue. Again, by default, the other parts are transparent. We also can take a look at the top bar here and see that we are looking at sketch 1 of part 2 main bearing in main bearing. Again, all that stuff's just to let us know that we're editing a component in the context of an assembly. So what it did for us is it started a new sketch on the front plane. And so we want to go ahead and move using Control 1. We'll look at the front plane and start to build our geometry. Front plane is going to act as a parting plane for us. And so all of our tapering and all of our draft is going to come from the front plane and outwards to the extremities of the parts. So for some of this, we're going to use the part geometry. Other parts we'll just sketch in. I like to start off with the main thing that's the most important about this bearing, and that is that we need a circle right here in the middle that we're going to specify our minor diameter on our material. Using the S key, I can quickly get to the circle tool, and I can either use the default circle or perimeter circle. Here I do want to use good design intent. I'm going to use that origin, and I'll just drag out here a little ways and select again with the left mouse button to place my circle. I'm going to use that S key again, and I'm going to go over to the Smart Dimension tool because I want to quickly define between that circle, and I'll use the geometry of this bearing and say I think I want it to have about 60 thousandths of material. Now you'll notice that the particular units I'm using right now are in inches. This assembly was built using metric dimensions. But while I'm inside this default part template that was used, I can see here from the lower right that my units is the IPS, inch, pounds, and seconds. I'm going to go ahead and add a few more dimensions in here before I exit the sketch and make a change to the units. If you happen to make a change to the units mid-sketch, it's just going to exit you out of the sketch, which you can re-enter using Edit Sketch in order to get back and do the work. So let's take a look. I use the Escape key to get out of that command, and now I can start to select either individual edges or I could choose faces. But what I want to do is I want to offset this geometry to get me some more material than is needed for this machined part, because typically we need to allow for imperfections as part of the casting, forging, or whatever molding process that we're doing here. So with those three edges selected, I'm going to choose to offset entities, and then we can set up our parameters. And so maybe in this case we want to come out that 0.06 in inches here, and I want to reverse that so that way I see the yellow preview updates where I can see that it's going outside. I need to at least have more material than what is for our machined part, because the machined itself is pretty is reduced to an amount that lets us minimize the amount of stock that might be needed. Green check mark there will accept the offset. And anytime that you do an offset off of geometry, it's going to be exact for that length of that edge. But what we can do is we can pick those up and drag them along here and let the inference lines snap those back up. Another thing that I like to do is I like to have lines of symmetry established using center lines. And so maybe I want to come in here and specify what our center line is going to be, and that might allow us, as we draw the rest of our geometry, get us to a point to where we're minimizing the clicks to get that geometry. And so I'm going to sketch this in. And we know that we're going to have to draft a lot of this geometry. We're going to have to add taper to it to get it in and out of a mold. And so what sometimes people will do is they will come in and they'll go ahead and draw in angles that might be needed to help out with. There's a little bit of an order of operation, and it's never the same for every piece of geometry. But I'll just say that whenever you're doing this, it's a lot of times better just to leave it as straight geometry and then come back later on and add your draft angle using the draft feature, which we're going to learn about a little bit later. Use my right mouse button and or S keys in order to get in and out of commands very quickly. And here I'll select a series of entities and then my center line, and this is going to allow me to use the mirror entities, and it won't ask for any other input. Tony Riggs does a video on symmetry and mirroring, and so if you're looking for more information or detail on that, be sure to look for his SOLIDWORKS Essentials, Symmetry, and Patterns. I need to check and make sure that everything lined up here over on this side, and it did. If it doesn't, we just drag the endpoint of that entity in order to get it exactly where we want it placed. Now, the reason why I did it this way rather than using the consistent offset is I wanted to control each face independently. I'm going to work all the way over here on this right-hand side because I did create this geometry and then mirror it over to the other side. So let's go ahead and dimension that off. I want to add a minimal amount of information to the top of this, and so I'm going to come in with 30 thousandths inch face here, and then I also want to do very minimal amount here, so we'll do 30. But here on the bottom, I want to make sure that I get a really nice, clean, true face. And so for that, I'm going to make sure that I add 60 thousandths. And these are just nice, round, even numbers that I've used just as part of my own experience over the years that I like to have for these types of components. Down here, this is another situation where I need a minimal amount of material, and then on the bottom as well. It's up to your design intent, your liking. Some would argue that I need more material here on the bottom. Again, it's up to your discretion, design intent. And if you'll notice, I'm also not adding any fillets. I think all fillets and draft need to be added as a secondary operation. We've got our sketch where we want to. Now we're ready to make the extrude.